Epigenetics and research and transformational sound and music listening, the collision of grassroots movements and epigenetics. What is epigenetics? The epi part of the word means above our genetic response. So basically, it's saying that we have basic responses to our environment and to the stressors that we experience in our life. And the epi part means we can access stimulating our system, our genetics, that changes how the codes are responding. And instead of allowing dysregulation, we can actually go in and prevent that based on our behavior. So this means that instead of changes in our immune system or a weakening of it, dysregulation and inflammation, and which is part of cardiovascular disease, chronic pain, addiction, and diabetes. So epigenetics refers to connecting responses where we stimulate genetic switches to not turn on where the systems are failing, but instead supports our immune system and the different systems of our body so they don't experience a weakening. So how is epigenetics related to particular sound and music listening? The research shows the evidence of listening to particular sound and music has effects on the human gene regulation and prevents neurons from degeneration, just like the same as meditation. And more information on this, if you want more research, is on my resource page at 3, the number 3, and it's melete.com. There are different unconnected grassroots movements that emphasize accessing other levels of consciousness that provide healing, insight, understanding, and transformation, and are really connected to this movement that's occurring and related to epigenetics. The International Association for Near-Death Studies gives people a platform to share their transformational experiences similar to the Spiritual Awakening International Group, where people are able to share the variety of their experiences, as well as the International Spiritual Emergency Network, where people get support instead of pathologicalizing their experience. So these are 3 that are pretty prevalent that are contributing to shifting the paradigm about accessing other levels of consciousness. Other areas where our culture is changing perspective on drawing upon other levels of consciousness includes the use of psychedelics for dealing with PTSD and trauma and resolution of issues. There's also a rise in the interest and using channeling, accessing another level of consciousness. And there is the work of Stephen Greer and also the Crazy Wise movement, that term coined by Phil Borges. And the Crazy Wise movement presents that people with experiences previously medicated or institutionalized and pathologicalized in Western culture require kindness and care rather than all the other responses and isolation. And beyond this, other isolated cultures isolated from our Western influence, regard when people have significant experiences, these changes, they're connecting to another realm of consciousness, and their contribution is important to their communities. So they are taken in by someone who understands that and giving them the guidance to continue, the guidance for balance, integration, and how to manage the energy. Moving beyond looks like opening awareness to our human development through systems that are directly applicable not only to prevalent conditions, but to further our evolution. So all of these cultures collectively are saying that these other states of consciousness are very important. So having tools to connect to them that shifts our brainwaves, heart rate, and respiration. They develop resilience, creativity, insight, problem solving, and release stress and increase melatonin and dopamine production, and also are interruptions into the previous status quo of how other levels of consciousness weren't valued. And they benefit our genetic responses. Since accessing the shifts in brainwaves, heart rate, and respiration diminish the release of cortisol, the stress hormone, and increases dopamine and melatonin, the process and the continued use of accessing different levels of consciousness interrupts the status quo of genetic responses to trauma, environmental exposures, loss, and challenges, which often lead to the inflammatory response and the conditions related to the inflammatory response mentioned before. When we regularly access these shifts in consciousness, also known as meditative states, not as a one-time intervention or peak experience only, but as regular connections, like in ancient times, to our own mysticism, inner wisdom, and transformation as an alchemical and epigenetic power of our evolution. Culturally, we are being called to methods for our longevity, understanding, healing, overcoming the stressors, including generational traumas, as well as acceleration of consciousness as activations that interface with the physical and the non-physical and are keys to the numinous. Having regular and easy to use methods that ground our different systems that also create balance and integration into the physical body, mind, emotions, and spirit, as well as the neurological system, while developing resilience, intuition, insight, problem solving, and creativity are all connections with our epigenetic responses.